Hello, BookTube. Well, it's a boiling hot Friday here in Boston. Bright, sunny skies. Very little in the way of humidity, but I could tell even first thing this morning that it was going to be hot. That once the sun came up and started getting its mojo on, it was going to be a hot day. And now that's not quite. I mean, I have a dog who's very sensitive to the heat, so I have to be extra cautious about that. I can't just be carefree. With my beagles, I could be carefree, except for once or twice when one of them would get very old and suddenly be very sensitive to any kind of change. But usually, and beagles are mighty, mighty hardy dogs, so I usually didn't have to worry about it all that much. Frida is a mighty hardy dog, but she has a marked, I've noticed it since she was a puppy, a marked vulnerability to the heat. So I have to pay attention to that, but only, I figured, at midday. The thing that makes the heat feel like just awful right away is high humidity. And I think that's coming back, but it's not here today. So I made a spur-of-the-moment decision to go to the Brattle Bookshop, to leave my little bean for a little while and go to the Brattle Bookshop. And I did, and it was wonderful. Downtown Boston tends to be hotter. We've got all that pavement, all those buildings, all those cars. But even so, the Brattle was a dream. Of course, the Brattle is nice and crisply air-conditioned. But the reason why I would pay attention to climactic conditions when I go to the Brattle is because next door to the shop is an enormous sale lot. Thousands more books, not just a wheelbarrow full of books or even the selection that you get outside the Strand in New York City, but 10 times that much. A whole bookstore's worth of books that are out there for $1, $3, or $5. They're not organized in any way other than price. And I got there first thing, when there weren't crowds of bumbling, stupid, rude tourists, when there weren't crowds of bumbling, stupid, rude humans at all, when I got to just look at those books in leisure. And I got a pile of books. Now, in my own defense, I have three things in my own defense. I know you don't need defenses. But number one, recently I had the traumatic experience of trying to open the Nook app on my iPad and having it not open. It just wouldn't open. And Barnes & Noble, the app, and Barnes & Noble, the company, the Nook app, the iPad itself, no one was offering me any avenues to fix that. The avenue was clear, which was delete the app, and then when you re-download it, you can just re-download all of the stuff that you bought from Barnes & Noble. But that doesn't help you with side-loaded stuff, and I had 2,500 side-loaded books on that app. They're all gone. I had to delete it anyway. I couldn't use it, so I had to delete it anyway. And that sort of, for a moment anyway, made me think, well, I've never walked into a room and suddenly had all the books disappear from the shelves. They might be an incredible annoyance in a lot of other ways, but they don't do that. It didn't put me off the wonder of ebooks at all, and I did re-download the Barnes & Noble Nook app, and I have been industriously refilling it. But that's justification number one. And then justification number two is that thanks to the massive amount of construction that went on here at Hyde Cottage, I have a huge amount of bookshelf space. The equivalent, in the little book room itself, I have the equivalent of 2 whole bookcases that are empty. I haven't actually moved things around so that there are 2 whole bookcases that are empty, but there are that many shelves that are empty. And in the rest of Hyde Cottage, another 2 whole bookcases that are empty. Big bookcases. There's plenty of room for books here. That's justification number 2. And justification number 3 is something I've said about the Brattle many times before, which is that I view it as a wave. It is a wave washing on the shore and then receding, washing on the shore and then receding. And it leaves behind things. I'm not expecting to keep forever all the books I get at any Brattle trip. Things are so inexpensive there that although today's could have been less expensive if there had been Brattle book credit for Steve at the shop. There was conspicuously none of that. But anyway, books are so inexpensive there that I'm not experiencing any sunk cost fallacy here to go through them. So I'm not expecting to keep forever everything that I get at the Brattle. I'm going to read it all, but I'm not expecting to keep it all. I will keep a fraction of it, and I don't always know what that fraction will be. I go through them, I reassess them, I reread parts or all of them, and they go on shelves, and as time passes, I will look at those shelves and say, I don't need to keep that, or I don't need to keep that. But a small but perceptible fraction of those books I do keep. So that's justification number 3. Really, the only justification I had is that it was a huge, well-stocked used bookstore full of variety in a place where I am well-known and marginally well-liked. I don't think you would need more rationale. I certainly didn't. So I went, and I got a ton of books. And I want to show them to you. Starting with a bunch of mass-market paperbacks. The first one of which is going to need reinforcement. I do not need this. I think I have an e-copy of this, although maybe not. Maybe it disappeared when that Barnes & Noble app disappeared. This is P.G. Wodehouse, which of course is synonymous for me with enjoyable light summer reading. And this is Mulliner Nights, with one of these great covers. Who does these? The covers by Ionicus. I love these Ionicus covers that Ionicus did for Penguin with these orange spines. I love them. I had in that old Barnes & Noble app the entire run of P.G. Wodehouse, all of them, not just Mulliner, but everything, with these Ionicus covers. Maybe I can still find them, but I grabbed this anyway. I mean, it was $1, so I didn't mind. And this is a collection of short stories centered around characters telling stories about other characters. And I remember there being real highlights to this. There's one story in here called The Bestseller that's all about books and reviewing and reading that I genuinely loved. I know that it's going out on a limb here. It's making a lot out of a little. But I honestly do believe that some of the Mulliner stories have a different register for Wodehouse than the Jeeves and Wooster or the Blandy's Castle. I honestly do think that they feel a little different. They feel a little bit more, I want to say general audience. I don't know, but I will reinforce this thing and just gulp it right down. Then this next one, mass market paperback. I don't know how sturdy this is. Don't know if it will stand a reread, and it will be familiar to you because this is a historical novel called Long Knife. This is by James Alexander Thom, and it's about George Rogers Clark. I said William Clark, because William Clark was his little brother, who was the Clark of Lewis and Clark Expedition. This is the older brother, who was a massively important figure in American pre-colonial and colonial history that is now forgotten completely. The most of these remembered is this book. James Alexander Thom is a terrific writer, a very scrupulous researcher. This is the classic 80s design with that classic 80s artist. I wonder if this artist is even credited. See, you've got montages on the back there. If you know paperback books from this era, oh wow, this has a fold-out map. Good Lord. Oh wow, mass market paperbacks don't usually have that. But if you know 1979, so right on the doorstep of the 1980s, if you know books from this period, you will know this artist. I wonder if the artist is credited. Probably not. At this time period, they just didn't do that. No, the artist is not credited. But this might seem familiar to you because I found a trade paperback of this novel when I was up in Vermont one time. When I was used book hunting with Mark Richardson, I found a copy of this in a big fat trade paperback that is still up in Vermont. So I found the mass market paperback. I'd completely forgotten this existed as a mass market paperback. And I think I will probably still be pining for my trade paperback because I don't know that this will stand a read. It's in perfect condition, but I don't know that it will. This is American colonial historical fiction of a type that is largely gone, and I love this author. I really want to give this author another try with any paperback that I find of his work. Then we have something that I've had this volume many times. This is an old Signet classic that will go with my Signet classics. Not exactly as thrilling as The Three Musketeers or The Idiot or Pride and Prejudice, but this is the selected writings of Jonathan Edwards, who was a fire and brimstone divine a few centuries ago in America. If most of you will only be familiar with this writer from one thing that he wrote, which is a lecture called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And if you only know this author from that thing, unfortunately, you probably know a lot of the pathologies that ruled this author's life. If you read Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, first of all, I urge you to do it. It's an amazing piece of prose. But I want you to remember when you're reading it that it was not fantasy. It was not a flight of exaggeration. It accurately depicts the psychological horrors, the psychological tiger cage that a huge number of people lived in thanks to this version of fire and brimstone Christianity for centuries. Read that lecture. I mean, this has lots of other things too. Jonathan Edwards was an amazing fellow, amazingly observant, a beautiful prose stylist. You can tell it from that sermon, but there are a lot of things he wrote that weren't angry, that are also beautiful and that are in here. This is a lovely selection of his work. But when you read that piece, remember that people literally believed it, and plenty still do. I saw this and I grabbed it. I've grabbed this so many times from used bookstores. I always either get rid of it or it gets destroyed. One copy that I got at the Harvard bookstore basement, the basement of the Harvard bookstore across the river in Cambridge is used books. I got a copy of this same edition years and years and years ago there, and it was totally destroyed by beagles almost as soon as I got it out of the bag back at home. But when I saw this, in addition to wanting it, I have a little shelf of these Signet classics. I was also hoping that there was a big fat biography of Jonathan Edwards that came out about 30 years ago that I would very much like to have again. I'd like to have another shot at it. Didn't see it at the Brattle today. Maybe this person was just getting rid of paperbacks, whoever sold this to them. I was happy to have it, though. Same thing with this next one, which I've had many, many times, and which was also a kind of collectible thing. These old, who is this? Signet, yeah. This is the selected poetry of George Herbert with this beautiful cover design. And Signet did a whole series of these, and they're beautiful. The whole lot of them are beautiful. They all have cover designs that look just like this. Really understated, stately, and beautiful for all the major poets in English. And I once had them all, and I don't anymore. I don't have any of them. I don't know why. They're really good editions of their individual poets. The Wordsworth volume, the Milton volume especially, wonderful. Somewhere along the line, I got rid of them all. This is the only one that I currently have, and I grabbed it not only because I really like George Herbert, but also because I was thinking Brattle thoughts. I was thinking, it's possible, it's unlikely, but it's possible that the person who sold this to the Brattle, the place where they got it, maybe that person had them all. In which case, the others will be scattered in boxes down in the basement, will be coming up in their own sweet time. I might find more of them on the Brattle carts. Even if it's not the same person, I might down the line find more of them. I didn't want to think, the worst thing in the world would be if I passed on this. It was only $1, so I wasn't going to pass on it. But if I passed on it, and then a month, 2 months from now, I come across 4 of these. 4 different poets, but not George Herbert. The worst thing in the world would be to grab those 4 and think, gee, I should have got that Herbert when I saw it. So I grabbed this. I don't need it, but I'm hoping to seed the ground. I'm hoping that I can find all of these. Then this next one, historical novelist, best-selling historical novelist. I've never read this book. I've read a lot by this author, but not this book. This is The Secret of the Kingdom by Mika Waltari, the author of the Etruscan and the Roman and the Egyptian. I've read all of those. I've read some of those multiple times. But I've never read this. And I don't know if this is even a translated work. I looked inside it a bit, and there's no translator listed. Unfortunately, that was often the case back when this came out. When did this come out? This was a Cardinal original paperback in 1961. Still in really good shape for something that's, 70 years old. But back then, it was often the case that if a translator was involved, they just weren't mentioned at all. Same thing with cover art. You just didn't know who it was. And this is, I've never read this. So this will be new to me. This is, what we need is an impartial witness, Pontius Pilate said. You, Marcus, are a clear-headed man. Find out what happened, then come back and tell me. And so the young Roman visitor, who was something of a philosopher and a searcher after truth, went with the legion officer Adenabar, must be a Palestinian legion officer, to the sepulchre where Jesus had been laid to rest after the crucifixion. What he discovered there, though the proconsul would not publicly accept it, turned him to search for the way and the kingdom. And what's his name? Marcus? I'm sure what he's going to discover, given the pieties of the age when this book was written, is that it's all true. And I want to stress, first of all, that it's unbelievably unlikely. It's church mythology that Jesus had a sepulcher. Okay. If he did exist, and if he was crucified in a line of other criminals, then his body was tossed in a ditch, not put in a sepulcher by a member of the Sanhedrin. But I want to point out not only that, but also the governor of Judea telling someone, look, this is causing lots of outrage. There were huge crowds of people following this figure all over the countryside. Vast rumors of him healing the sick and even raising the dead. He caused disturbances in the temple in Jerusalem. Now we have crucified him. The Roman state has crucified him. But now there are all sorts of rumors that he is alive, that he didn't die. His followers seem more vociferous than ever. I need someone to look into this and write me a report. I want to point out here, I know this is just a novel and I'll probably enjoy it. I want to point out that conspicuously did not happen. Nothing like that happened. Nothing like that happened. And it would have. The Roman imperial authority in Rome, the Roman provincial authority in Judea or in Caesarea, the Jewish authorities, the Palestinian authorities, the Sanhedrin itself, there would have been many reports. And there weren't any. There weren't any. So there were crowds of thousands of people being fed miraculously, being raised from the dead, people being healed left, right, and center, including, we are told over and over again in the Gospels, wealthy people, visitors, people who were literate and who had access to the tools of writing, not just the poor people of Judea. We're told that over and over again. This was not just a poor person's movement, and this did not happen. The whole world would be different if we had even one document that did what this book says. So I'm going to be thinking of that while I'm reading it, but that certainly, Pontius Pilate or his successor would certainly have done that if this had been real. If these weren't just Christian tall tales made up in the late 1st century, then we would have primary documents about such a thing. And a stray mention here and there in Tacitus or wherever, a forgery in Josephus, but nothing like what we would have. I just thought I'd point that out. I want to be a rabble-rouser. I don't know if this will be any good. Certainly there are aspects of the Egyptian and also the Etruscan that aren't good. So it could be that this crosses the line into trash. I know that's heresy to say about such a beloved, once upon a time beloved author, but this could be trash, which would place it perfectly in time because we're right on the doorstep of Garb August, of the BookTube event that celebrates trash. Could be that this is that. We're going to have a whole lot of discussions about what counts as trash. But this next one, I confess, the Waltari book I got because I've never read it, and I've enjoyed reading most of what I've read by this author, so I grabbed it, and it was $1. This next one, though, I confess I got it wondering if it was trash. We shall see. This is by Matthew Vaughn, but not the Matthew Vaughn who is the director of The King's Man, the relatively recent movie that has a ninja fighting Rasputin. It's going to take all my self-control not to leave that clip down below, since I love that clip more than anything. Time to dance on your graves. There's nothing like it. Nothing at all. But it's not that Matthew Vaughn. It's 2 generations before that Matthew Vaughn. And this is called The Discretion of Dominic Ayres. And he has that maybe it's Maybelline 1970s look about him. I'm assuming that's Dominic Ayres. And he's got a whip and a long cape. So this, I'm assuming, came out in the 70s. What excuse would you have for being anything like what you are if you didn't? Yeah, 1976. This came out in 1976. And let's see here. It's set in 1896. A decadent and frighteningly demonic tale unravels as the brutally slashed body of a young man, the 3rd victim in the month, beaten to death with a bamboo cane, is fished from the Thames. Dominic Ayres, whose detective ingenuity surpasses the ordinary imagination of Scotland Yard, is assigned to the case. Trudging through the sordid underworld for leads, Dominic finds himself amid kidnappings, disguises, mystical rites, the threat of vampirism, massacres on mountainsides, and a slew of sadistic sex slaves. See what I mean? I'm kind of thinking this is trash. Close on the trail of a group of bizarre sex murderers, as opposed to, the normal 9-to-5 sex murderers, he becomes immersed in the horrors of London's slums and the chilling sweat of stalking 2 vicious killers by night. I think I might have an entrant here for Garb August. Of course, my co-host and I are a horrible, disreputable band. We'll be reading a lot of garbage in August. I'll be reading a lot of garbage in August. I have a lot here, and I can get more. Oddly enough, I mean, ordinarily, if you watch this channel, you expect that no matter what my bookish needs are, I will go to the Brattle Bookshop. And that is ordinarily true, but for garbage, the internet is a far more fruitful place. Free self-published books on Amazon are sometimes the bee's knees of garbage. I need to look around. I have a lot lined up, but a lot more to do. But we'll finish those. That finishes the mass market paperbacks. Now we can go on to bigger trade paperbacks. And this first one, it's a delight. I wasn't expecting it. This is the Poems of Catullus, who you all, those of you who've been watching this channel, will know that I really love. I really love the Poems of Catullus. But this is edited with an introduction, a revised text, and commentary by Kenneth Quinn. And you'll notice, from what I just mentioned there, the one thing I did not mention, which is translated. These are not translated. So you get the poems up at the front, just as Catullus wrote them, I think. Who knows? He survives in one medieval text. We don't have anything to know for sure. But then a blizzard of annotation in the back. Hundreds of pages of close, line-by-line, word-by-word annotation. Now, sometimes that annoys me. This Kenneth Quinn is not known to me. He may be annoying, in which case a little of that will go a long way, but I love it. Absolutely live for it. I like both. I like both. For me, this is paradise. Because this is me and Catullus with no bungling translator in between. No translator, no matter how smart, saying, well, look at this clever thing I'm going to do with this anapest. There's nothing like that. Instead, it's just me and the genius of the poet. That's one thing that I love. I also love exhaustive analysis of the things that I read. The things I love, especially love a lot, I can do that endlessly. It's a critic in me. I love that. And I have a feeling that the analysis part of here is going to be endlessly critical. Not in the sense of negative, but in the sense of analyzing literally everything, every syllable. And I'm totally on board for that, totally. So, and then this next one is by R.T. McMullen. It's a lovely thing. This is Down Channel. This is from Grafton Books in the UK. And this is a classic of nautical literature. This is, let's see here. McMullen was a pioneer among amateur small boat sailors, whose voyages off the coast of England in the 19th century are the subject of this sailing classic. This is I read this a long time ago in a big musty hardcover. This is a very much improved thing. I don't have that hardcover anymore. I think I got it out of a library. Maybe in Falmouth or Gloucester. But anyway, in his honest and forthright style, he logs both successes and early difficulties. His first boat, Leo, sank on the day it was launched. A nasty accident with a flapping sail nearly dragged him overboard and almost cost him his sight. Two idle and grumbling crew members, Henry and George, had to be sent home from France in disgrace. These initial setbacks, however, served only to strengthen his determination and to confirm his belief that to go to the sea in a merely playful spirit was to assume, foolishly, that the sea intended to be merely playful too. I remember this being just delightful. One of those things, it doesn't always happen. It doesn't happen as often as the authors claim. But one of those books where you're not 10 pages in before you are aware that this is a book that sailors are going to pass from hand to hand, that it actually is a nautical classic. And now I have it in this lovely paperback. That is just wonderful. So I will give it a reread. Then this next one, thereby hangs a tale. All of these things have tails to them. I assume you don't click on a Brattle Bookshop video without knowing that it's going to be long and rambly. I'm assuming that anyway. This is a Hugo Marston novel by Mark Pryor. This is called The Book Artist. Kind of a lovely photograph cover. Not a big fan of photograph covers, but this will do. Hugo Marston accompanies his boss, U.S. Ambassador J. Bradford Taylor, to the first night of an art exhibit in Paris. Hugo is less than happy about going until he finds out that the sculptures on display are made from his favorite medium, books. Soon after the champagne starts to flow and the food has been served, however, the night takes a deadly turn when one of the guests is found murdered. So standard setup for a murder mystery, and the story behind this one is that I was in the shop a week or two ago. I mostly shop outside in the sale lot at the Brattle, but I will go inside, not only to cool off in the AC, but also to talk to the staff and get in everybody's way and make fun of people and whatnot. And I will also browse around because the prices inside the shop are still completely reasonable. And I was in the mystery section and I saw this book. I pulled it out. I read that back cover. I thought, yeah, that sounds interesting enough to get. Absolutely. And I put it back on the shelf. I don't know why. I think I was just looking around. I hadn't really started filling a hand with books yet. And when I went back, I couldn't find it. When I went back right then, that visit, I couldn't find it. I didn't want to make any fuss about it. I didn't want to ask anybody, obviously, because the Brattle doesn't have a computerized inventory, and how are they supposed to know what the last book I was handling was? So I figured, it'll turn up. And it showed up in the sale lot today, not inside the shop. I figured if the shop is trying twice to attract my attention to this book, I should probably get it. And I'm always up for a murder mystery, whether it's March Mystery Madness or not. That is it for the trade paperbacks. Then we have the hardcovers. Here's where Steve starts playing the world's smallest violin, because keep in mind, I had to lug all these things back here myself. I didn't have any muscular teenagers. I didn't have any dog's bodies of any kind. And there's a lot of hardcovers. My bag was heavy when I got back here. It's lucky that I am a spry, sprightly 28-year-old, or I wouldn't have been able to do it. But the first book that we'll look at here is an ex-library copy. It's got a little bit of library folderol on it that I'll have to fix. But I read this and loved it, and I didn't keep it. I got it from the publisher. This came out in 2014? Yes, 2014. And I didn't keep it, even though the author wrote a book I love. This is Philip Hoare. He wrote a book called The Whale that I loved, and this is the sea inside, which is illustrated. I don't know if we're going to be able to. I don't know if it's got photos, but it's also got line drawings in here. I'm not going to be able to do it the cool way. It's got photos all throughout, but it's got there we go. It's got line drawings, not only full pages, but also spot illustrations, and also archival stuff. Not just photos that the author has taken, but also archival prints and whatnot. And this is sort of the backdrop to his book, The Whale, writ large. This is just all of the sea, the life, the people, the islands, the weather especially. A gorgeous, gorgeous book. It has the library stuff on it. I'm going to have to see, you've got one thing up here and one thing down there. I don't want either one of those on there. So I'm going to have to take the library the plastic off here, because those aren't affixed to the plastic. They're affixed to the dust jacket. So I have to take the plastic off, get those things off the dust jacket, then put the plastic back on. I'm willing. It's a bit of a rigmarole, but I'm willing to do it because I'm going to be so happy to reread this. So that's one hardcover. Okay, then this next hardcover, big thing. I don't think I've ever quite seen this book in this format, so I had to grab it. I'm always up for a reread. This is Kenneth Roberts, and this is his novel Arundel. Only in this big hardcover. I don't think I've ever seen it like this before. I checked, and this is not illustrated. It's just this huge thing. Wait, there's a card in here. It's a reservation receipt from 1962. Okay. From Woods Hole. From Martha's Vineyard. This is a ticket to reserve a seat on the ferry. On the Woods Hole ferry. Oh, son of a gun. All right, well, maybe this came from a bookstore on the Vineyard, or went there, certainly, and came back. And this is Kenneth Roberts, one of his great novels about the American Revolution. This author is largely gone now. Not remembered at all. Not reprinted, as far as I know. But his books are terrific. Meaty, solid historical fiction. This one, among other people, stars Benedict Arnold. And Arundel is the old name for Kennebunkport, Maine, which is an area of Maine that I know quite well. I know every cove, every inlet, and one particular compound quite well. This is the old name, and this is the time when that was full of fighting men who had all kinds of cross-grained motives. This is just a big, utterly involving novel that I don't have. I don't have Arundel. I had a copy once and gave it to one of you. But I've never seen this edition before, so I grabbed it. I probably would like an illustrated Arundel, but I'm not sure that such a thing exists. I wasn't willing to leave it behind, especially since these were all cheap. Then this next one, I have praised this author before, and I had an ebook of this, but my ebooks disappeared with my Barnes & Noble Nook app. I think this was one of the ones that disappeared. But this is Dermot McCullough, and this is his big book on the Reformation. Big, thick thing that I found in a beautiful, like-new hardcover, so I grabbed it. I have a hardcover of his History of Christianity, which is great. And, of course, in a History of Christianity, the Reformation is going to have a few chapters of its own. But it deserves its own book, and that's what this is. So, and you won't find a better writer on the subject than this writer. This is the story of Martin Luther. It's the story of Erasmus. It's the story of Melanchthon and Zwingli and a whole bunch of other people. And the common people that Dermot McCullough remembers their whole lives were thrown into upheaval by what we now think of as the Reformation. Henry VIII is in here and everybody else. So it's a grand, broad story, and I'm very happy that this author decided to write an independent, freestanding book about it. I would very much like it if this author would consider doing that for other things as well. What I wouldn't give for a 1,000-page hardcover book by this author, A History of the Papacy. What I wouldn't give for that, but he sets his own course. But I saw this for cheap, and I know that I want it. I know that I like it. I'll definitely reread it. This next one is also a reread. I have had this only in trade paperback. Wasn't aware until today that it even came in hardcover. This is by David Hewson, who's really, really good. I strongly recommend everything. But this is Lucifer's Shadow, which is his Venice book, as you can tell from the cover there. Let me give you a little hint of this. From the moment he arrives in Venice, Daniel Forster is seduced by the city's mystery and eroticism. An earnest young academic, Daniel has come for a summer job cataloging a private collector's library. But when Daniel's employer sends him to buy a stolen violin from a petty thief, a chain reaction of violence and deception ignites. Suddenly, Daniel is drawn into a police investigation, and a tempest swirling around a beautiful woman, a mysterious palazzo, and a lost musical masterpiece dating back centuries. With each step he takes, Daniel unwittingly retraces a journey that began in 1733, when another young man came to Venice, and when, in this realm of intrigue and beauty, two lovers came face to face with a killer, and a mystery was born. You know that is going to be Vivaldi, and I'm not spoiling the book by saying that, but this is just so good. It's such a good Venice novel, and I saw it and thought, oh yeah, that was so good. Yeah, you really should reread that. And then, to my horror, standing there in front of the carts, I thought, wait, you don't have a copy. Grab that. You don't have a copy. So now I do, thank God. And a nice, durable hardcover. And then the last two we'll finish up here, so we don't go on for 2 hours. The last two are letter collections. There were a few letter collections in the sale lot today and in the shop. You never know. I never know whether or not to pay attention to that when the Brattle has a whim like that. I don't want to just willy-nilly buy letter collections. I'm not all that interested in all of them. Although just recently at the Brattle I found a letter collection by William Styron, Martha's Vineyard fixture. And going through that has been wonderful. Just wonderful. But I found two letter collections that I did want, that I know that I want. One is, and they're in beautiful condition, and they're in these plastic Mylar coverings, so they're going to stand even the brutal handling that I give to my books. The first one is the Selected Letters of Marianne Moore, the great poet Marianne Moore, who is terrific in prose as well. Her prose is fantastic, and her letter writing, oh my, she was living in the heyday of letter writing, as were most of the people whose letter collections were in the sale out. I saw Robert Lowell, I saw Philip Larkin, a whole bunch of other people. But I grabbed these letters of Marianne Moore because they are so, so good. Raising really the letter to an art form. And if I remember correctly, I think I read this when it first came out. I want to say in the early 90s. 1997, so in the late 90s. I read this when it first came out, really liked it. I wasn't reviewing books at the time, but I really liked the job that was done. This is, I suppose I should say, who does it, right? It's Select Letters of Marianne Moore on the cover, but who actually puts this together? Celeste Goodrich and Christiane Miller are the editors on this volume. I don't know what their relation is to Marianne Moore, but this is going to be a delight. And the great thing about letter collections, whether it's Bill Styron or I've got one of the greatest letter collections of all, one art, the Letters of Elizabeth Bishop. No matter what it is, no matter who it is, one of the great things about letter collections is that you don't have to sit there and read it from front to back. You can you can very much plop in and out, especially if the identification of the minutiae is done well. The only reason you would ever have to read one of these things from front to back is if, Willikins is not identified on page 350, where you have to go all the way back to page 4 to find out who he is. But this is going to be a delight to revisit. And same thing with this next one. Our last book, you'll be happy to know. This is also an ex-library edition. I will also have to fix this a little. This is The Letters of Edith Wharton. Big, generous selection of The Letters of Edith Wharton. This is edited by Nancy Lewis and R.W.B. Lewis. R.W.B. Lewis being the author of a great biography of Edith Wharton. And the same thing, when Marianne Moore was writing, there were alternatives to letters. When Edith Wharton was writing, there weren't. So if anything, the mastery here is even greater. And I've never read this volume. I don't think I've ever seen it until today. I've read Edith Wharton letters, but I've never read this volume. But the thing that I know already to love, an aspect that I know already I will love about both of these big letter collections, is that unlike Philip Larkin or Kingsley Amis or Robert Lowell or Ted Hughes, all men, I coincidentally noticed, unlike volumes like that, Marianne Moore and Edith Wharton are not compulsive name droppers. It's one thing that annoys the crap out of me when I'm reading a letters collection by a famous writer is when they name drop. When that's not only a large part of why they wrote their letters, but a large part of why their editors included those letters, so that it just becomes, and another thing that Dickie Nixon said when he came to visit the summer house. Please. I want those letters, certainly. But I also want the letters where, the letter writer is complaining because the post is late. Something like that. I don't want endless name dropping, and I won't get it with either one of these. So that's great. That's wonderful. And I don't know if this harbinges like a vein of collected letters. Do I want to go back and get the collected letters of Robert Lowell? He is a name dropper. But I remember that volume being really good. It's a big, great, big, thick thing. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. It's going to be awful hot for the next 20 days, even in the morning. It will depend on the humidity, I guess, and how my dog is doing. I don't want to leave her if she's feeling left, right, so to speak. If she knows that I come and go, sometimes, very seldom, less than I have with any other dogs, except when I was traveling, when they were with me all the time. She's with me almost all the time, but she does know that I can come and go, and she knows not to panic about it. But sometimes she doesn't like it. Sometimes she dislikes it more than others, so it'll be up for grabs. I'm always up for a trip to the Brattle. I think you're always up for me to have a trip to the Brattle. But this one was a success. There's a lot of reading that's going to happen this weekend and in the coming week from these books. So we have the selected letters of Marianne Moore. We have the letters of Edith Wharton. These are also selected, keep in mind, because Edith Wharton wrote a lot of letters every day. We have Lucifer's Shadow by David Hewson, a great Venice thriller. We have The Reformation by Dermot McCullough, his one-volume big treatment of the seismic revolution in the history of Christianity. We have Arundel by Kenneth Roberts in this hardcover I don't think I've ever seen. We have The Sea Inside by Philip Hoare, hoping that whoever dumped this off will eventually dump off a copy of The Whale. I would love to have that. The Book Artist by Mark Pryor, 2 times is the charm. Down Channel by R.T. McMullen in this beautiful UK paperback, just wonderful. We have The Poems of Catullus, just The Poems of Catullus. True, there's an editor carping along for the ride, but it's not The Poems of Catullus as translated by and then some schmuck. Instead, it's me and Catullus. And then I can ignore the editor if I want to. The poems are all up front. I can ignore him if I want to, but I won't want to. I'll want to see what he has to say. Then The Discretion of Dominic Ayres. I'm not sure that he has discretion. He seems like the 4th Charlie's Angel. I don't know that he has discretion. We'll see. Then The Secret of the Kingdom by Miko Waltari. And The Secret of the Kingdom, I suspect, is going to boil down to, it's twoo! It's twoo! It's really twoo! Then The Selected Poetry of George Herbert in this old Signet edition. I'm hoping to find others. John Donne, John Dryden, John Milton. Then the selected writings of Jonathan Edwards in a battered old Signet that I checked is not mine. Long Knife by James Alexander Thom. This will do for the mass market equivalent of the trade paperback that is still up in Vermont. And finally, Mulliner Nights by P.G. Woodhouse. Very much what Jason Harrigan referred to as a reader's copy. A reading copy. This is not in good enough shape. I'll reinforce it, but even so, I don't think it'll last more than one reading. But it'll be a fun reading. And I'm sure that when the heat reaches its worst, which it's going to do in about a week, about exactly a week from today, the temperature is going to reach its worst, which I think will be 110 degrees Fahrenheit. At the doorstep of next weekend, if I'm right, then that will be true. And boy, oh boy, with weather like that, you're never going to want P.G. Wodehouse more. I'm never going to want P.G. Wodehouse more than that. So that was my trip to the Brattle for today. It was largely unplanned, but so much fun. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.